Welcome to 20-0 Tactics with me, James The Loremaster Lammin, where you join me for another instalment in our 8-part series as we discuss the tactics for the 8 laws of battle magic from the core rulebook. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the Law of Light, and I'm going to begin by outlining how this video will be structured. Firstly, we're going to give you an overview of the Law of Light using our competitive rating system for the laws of magic. Now, this can be found on the rating system page on triplecrownwargaming.com and is the same system we use for our deep dive videos. Once we've established this, we will discuss getting the most out of the Law of Light on your wizards, and then finally we're going to take a look at each of the armies who have access to the Law of Light, covering maximising the Law of Magic within their faction. So let's take a look at that rating for the Law of Light. Now, whilst the Law of Light is only available to a handful of Warhammer armies, it still enjoys plenty of representation on the battlefields of competitive Warhammer. Now, the law is themed around purifying the world around it through banishing light or blinding augmentations. On the tabletop, this translates to a fantastic set of buff spells supported by strong magic missiles. So let's take a brief look at each of the 7 spells and get this law's competitive rating. Now, if you've not seen the system before, we'll give the law a score out of 24 based on the following 6 criteria. Variety of spell types, power and frequency of the law's attribute, average spell range, spell flexibility, average casting value, and the quality of the signature spell. So let's take a look at that law attribute to begin with, Exorcism. If a spell from the Law of Light inflicts a number of hits on an enemy unit, it will cause an additional D6 hits if the target unit is undead or demon. Now, this is clarified further in the rulebook FAQ to clearly set out that this does include Nehekaran undead, because apparently that did need clarification. It's quite a frustrating law attribute, this one, if I'm honest, principally because it only affects 3 of the spells in the law. However, against demon and undead targets, it's absolutely devastating due to the exceptionally low casting values when regarded against their output of both the magic missiles in this law. So, my summary would be this is a really strong attribute when it triggers. So let's move on and start taking a look at the spells, and we will begin as ever with the signature spell, Shem's Burning Gaze. Now, this one is a magic missile with a range of 24 inches and a casting value of 5+. The target unit suffers D6 strength 4 flaming hits. Furthermore, the wizard can extend the range of this spell to 48 inches and the strength of the hits to 6 on a casting value of 15+. Now, I've got to be honest, this is one of the best signature spells in the game, with a bargain basement casting value and fantastic range. What, in my opinion, makes this one so strong, however, is that ability to boost both the range and the strength. This means it can threaten anything from chaff to large monsters, the latter really suffering further from the fact that this spell also has flaming attacks. It triggers the law attribute as well, which means against those demon or undead targets, I can inflict 2d6 hits at strength 4 for a 5+ to cast. That is a great start, ladies and gentlemen. So, spell 1, Far's Protection. Now, this is an augment spell with a range of 24 inches and a cast value of 6+. All attacks that target the Far's protected unit suffer -1 to their hit rolls. Now, that's both shooting and combat hit rolls. Furthermore, if you don't use ballistic skill to shoot like a cannon, you must roll a 4+ on a d6 before shooting at the target, or the shot fails and is lost. Finally, you can choose to instead have this spell target all friendly units within 12 inches on a cast value of 12+. I've got to be honest, guys, this is another fantastic spell. It's consistent against almost every army in the game. It has fantastic synergy with several of the other spells in the lore as well, and we'll touch on that more as we look at the next spells. The low casting value of this as well is incredible, and to be honest, the boosted version isn't even much of a stretch, a 12+. That is top tier. You'll love to see it. On to spell number 2. This one is the Speed of Light. So we're sticking with the augments. This one has a range of 24 inches and a casting value of 8+. The target unit has a weapon skill and initiative of 10 until the start of the caster's next magic phase. The wizard can instead choose to have this spell target all friendly units within 12 inches. If he does so, increase the casting value to 16+. So it's a big increase on that casting value for the boosted version, but at the right time this can be potentially game winning as a buff. This one works incredibly well with the previous spell, Fire's Protection, making units with a weapon skill of 4 or less hit targets on a 6. Has a great impact for its low casting value again, and actually there's even more synergy with this one that we'll discuss later. Another fantastic augment for the Lore of Light. So speaking of augments, let's move on to our next augment spell, and this one is the Light of Battle. The Light of Battle is cast on a 9+ and targets a friendly unit within 12. That unit immediately rallies if they are fleeing and will pass all leadership tests they are called upon to make whilst under the effects of the Light of Battle. The wizard can instead choose to have this spell target all friendly units within 12 inches, increasing its casting value to 18+. This spell in effect makes the target unbreakable, but they can still choose to flee. A fantastic buff, but this is so often left at home by people, and I think that's just because you can't have every spell in the lore a lot of the time. And the other spells we've just been looking at, they're as good as this one, and in some ways they can be better. And there are a lot of other ways to make your army pass leadership tests. Lots of other synergy, lots of characters and things for a great many armies that can improve that. Now that in no way diminishes how good this spell is, and I think sometimes people really miss that fact. It is another big increase to the casting value to make it affect everyone, but the potential for armies that start with strong combat stat lines is quite obvious to see. So we are racing through and we've made it to spell number 4, and this is our only hex spell in the Lore of Light, and it's the Net of Amantok. This one is cast on a 10+ and has a range of 24 inches. The target unit must pass a strength test every time it moves, or shoots, or casts spells until the start of the caster's next magic phase. And there's a list of the specific moves that it affects: regular movement, flees, pursues, charges, overruns, the works. If the test is passed, the target acts normally. If it is failed, the target takes d6 strength 4 hits and cannot do the desired action. Finally, the wizard can extend the range of this spell to 48 inches for a very modest additional 3 to cast, taking it to a 13+. Okay, so there's quite a lot to unpack with this spell. This is a top tier control spell, especially against enemy wizards, the vast majority of which are strength 3, leading to a 50% foul rate in them attempting to cast whilst under the effects of this spell. Let's be clear, it's hard to put a value on this, but imagine your opponent fails that strength test on a spell like Purple Sun or the Dwellers Below. It can almost act as another dispel scroll for you. Furthermore, this is a phenomenal spell against enemy artillery, as artillery pieces automatically fail any strength test they are called upon to make. So under the effect of this spell, the artillery piece simply cannot shoot. My biggest point with this spell is that it affects flee movements. This is so strong because if a unit is beaten in combat and fails the leadership test whilst under the effects of this spell, and then fails their strength test when attempting to make their flee move, they do not move. However, they are still fleeing, which means they are automatically destroyed by the pursuing unit. It's absolutely fantastic. I've lost count of the games that my Tomb Kings have won by doing this type of tactic. It also works if a unit elects to flee as a charge reaction in the same way. So they flee and then stand however many inches they were away initially, but now if you make the charge, you come into contact with the fleeing unit and destroy them. Now, the first spell with a very modest casting value increase that we've seen in the lore, all the others have been sort of double the value or in some cases more, for the boosted version as well. So that's really nice, because we've not expected that until now. And even more fantastic, it can trigger the lore attribute, because they do take those d6 strength 4 hits if they fail the strength test, which if you're a demon or undead is 2d6. So, on to spell number 5 now, Banishment. Now this is our final magic missile and has a casting value of 10+ and a range of 24. The target unit suffers 2d6 hits with a strength of 4, +1 for each other friendly wizard who knows spells from the Lore of Light within 12 inches of the caster. And successful ward saves taken against Banishment must also be re-rolled. Finally, you can increase the range of the spell too. This one goes to 48 inches, increasing the casting value from 10 to 13+, so a moderate increase again. This spell is the reason you will very often see multiple Lore of Light wizards in an army if they have chosen to take the lore. The Light Council, as it is known, is a common sight on the competitive tabletop, and whilst this spell isn't a unit killer, it is a high value target smasher. It can easily get a high strength value, and as it forces the opponent to reroll ward saves against its hits, the damage is incredible. Combining it further with Shem's Burning Gaze beforehand would let you potentially get rid of a target's regeneration save as well. So that's regeneration saves you're affecting, and ward saves. And don't forget, if you get it up to that strength 6 or 7 or whatever value by having more light wizards, you're also taking the armor save down as well. It not only triggers the lore attribute, but has the very best synergy with it as well, as demon units take additional hits and generally rely on their ward saves for survival, which they then have to reroll. Powerhouse. And we made it to the end. Last up we have spell number 6, Barona's Time Warp. And this is our final augment spell with a range of 12 inches and a casting value of 12 plus. The target unit's movement is doubled and its attacks are increased by 1. Furthermore, the unit gains the Always Strikes First special rule. Finally, the wizard can instead choose to have this spell target all friendly units within 12 inches, increasing the casting value to a whopping 24 plus. Now, we all know how great Always Strikes First is, and it's even better when you're increasing the attacks of the unit that has it. What's so great about the increased attacks is that if you put it onto a spell with a split profile, like Cavalry, both the rider and the mount get an additional attack. This spell has obviously great synergy with the Speed of Light, all but guaranteeing you're re-rolling to hit and hitting on 3 plus if you have both off at the same time. The bonus to movement is useful but a bit situational. The very base cast value of this spell is insanely good, in my opinion. And whilst the boosted version is very strong, it's also situational due to that high cast value. The big drawback with this spell, honestly, is just its range, particularly when compared to the rest of the lore, but we are really splitting hairs at this point. This is one of the best augment spells in Warhammer. So that's it, we've done the spells, we've done the attribute, so let's sit down now and have a little look at the scores on the doors. Now, we've seen that the Lore of Light has some incredible augments and packs a lot of damage potential, so long as you have a coven of wizards to deliver it. So let's get the rating score for the lore. It gets a 2 for variety of spell types, a 2 for the power and frequency of its lore attribute, a 4 for the average spell range, a 2 for its spell flexibility, a 4 for its average casting value, and a 4 for the quality of its signature spell, giving this lore a very fair 18 out of 24. Now, I've got to say, that's a pretty impressive score for a lore that doesn't have a Remains in Play spell or a unit killer. So we're going to move on now to looking at getting the most out of the Lore of Light on your wizards. Now, the lore analysis shows us that the Lore of Light has a great internal synergy, a top tier signature spell, a fantastic spell range, and crucially, very low casting values. In fact, it has the lowest average casting value of all 8 battle magic lores, a stunning 8.5 plus to cast on average. As ever now, we're going to talk about the tactical tips you need to remember when using it in your games. Now, this section will be divided into 3. The general tactics, if you're using the Lore of Light, and then some specific considerations for what you want to do with a level 4 wizard on the Lore of Light, and a level 2 wizard on the Lore of Light, or a hero and a lord, if you like. Or a lord and a hero wizard, if you like. Unlike some of the other battle magic lores we've looked at, a wide variety of unit types can benefit one way or another from the augments in the Lore of Light. So if we're applying that in a general tactics for the lore sense, we want to start by saying you need to ensure your army contains units built for combat. In fact, units which often have poor weapon skill, initiative, or struggle to hit, but have good strength, are the ideal candidates for a Lore of Light based army. This is borne out in the armies you see most commonly using the lore in a competitive sense: the Empire, Tomb Kings, and Lizardmen. That isn't to say your army shouldn't include ranged threats too. On the contrary, Fire's Protection and, as we talked about earlier, Net of Amantok, and the 2 magic missiles in the lore mean that this lore is another one that works fantastically well as part of a combined arms type army. But it is very important, with the quality of the buff spells available to you with the Lore of Light, that you ensure you include a couple of excellent combat threat units in your list. The second general tactic for this lore is a game based on army build. Your army should, if possible, include multiple wizards on the Lore of Light. I like a level 4 wizard and 2 level 1 wizards myself, but I've seen this work really well with 3 level 2 wizards as well. The Light Council, as it's known, is mainly for the banishment strength effect, giving you a strength 6 on the banishment in this instance, but also can have other important uses. The Lore of Light doesn't have a large unit killer spell, but one of the ways that we can mitigate this is by having lots of its signature spell. With 3 casters, you could have as many as 3 Shem's Burning Gazes and a banishment, and whilst they individually won't kill an enemy unit, a sustained spam casting of these spells across 1 or 2 turns can significantly blunt even the most dangerous enemy units. Looking back at our first general tactic, combining this with some artillery, mass shooting, and in some cases Net of Amentok, will bring about a death by 1,000 cuts type effect on your enemies. I'd recommend checking out our 20-0 tactics on casting for some more information on the spam cast idea with this lore. Now, building on the second point of our general tactics, to get the most out of the Lore of Light, you're going to need to think about your wizard positioning. In fact, it's very important with this lore. Whilst the spells themselves generally have fantastic range, all of the boosted versions of the augments in this lore turn into bubble effects, hitting all friendly units within 12 inches. Now, this means you need to keep your casters clustered in the centre of your army for maximum effect. Further to this, the increased strength on banishment, which we've discussed several times already, requires other wizards to be within 12 inches of the wizard with banishment. So again, you need to keep an eye on the positioning of your casters throughout the game. I use the Lore of Light a lot, and I can tell you need to pay attention to this, because you can very easily slip out of range if you aren't staying sharp. Now, this will mean your army is relatively tightly packed, so you're going to want to think about curving your facings to reduce the arc of sight black spots that enemies could try to get into and exploit. And you'll want to make sure you have some chaff in your army to kite or redirect enemy threats away at times as well. Now, our final general tactic with the Lore of Light is going to be to try and get some items in your list that give you more power dice. The lore does have low casting values, but you're still going to want to get a lot of spells off in each turn to make the earlier tactics we've discussed work to their fullest, and to force your opponent to choose which spells to let you have and which spells to try and dispel. So I would be considering looking at items like Forbidden Rod and the Power Stone when building a Lore of Light army. So now we've gone through the general tactics, let's take a look at the differences in tactics between a Lord level wizard with a Lore of Light or a Hero level wizard, or a level 4 and a level 2. Now, unlike any other battle magic lore, if you're going to run a Light Council, then tactically there isn't a huge amount of difference in priority spells. All of the spells have a relatively low casting value. That said, if you're running a classic level 4 and level 2 and 2 level 1 Light Council, you'll probably want to get Banishment and Beer Honours on your level 4 wizard as a top priority, as they are the hardest for your low level wizards to cast. If instead you're running a solitary level 4 wizard on the Lore of Light, then your top priority spells should be the main augments. Speed of Light, Beer Honours Time Warp. They will have the greatest effect on your army's performance, especially if you're boosting the casting values on them, and Banishment is far less important without the boosting of its strength value through the Light Council mechanic. After that, you'll want to look at the matchup and aim at the best spells for the occasion. Fars is pretty consistent against any army, and then Net of Amentok or the Magic Missiles should be prioritised dependent on the enemy's army structure. Large blocks, look at Fars and Net. Multiple small units or low armoured targets, maybe look at the Magic Missiles more. If you're going for a solitary level 4 wizard on the Lore of Light, then I'd look to include some other damage output magic, or as mentioned earlier, things like artillery, just to supplement the lack of big damage from the Lore of Light. Looking now at the low level wizards, and I think I've made it clear that if you're going to take these guys, take several. Combine level 1s with a level 4, or take multiple level 2 wizards to impressive competitive effect. This can deliver fantastic spam casting with the level 1s, really making the most out of the basement cast value of 5+ on that signature spell, or can lead to a good suite of buffs with multiple level 2s. What's so great about the second option is that the casting values in general are very low in this lore. Getting several spells off is still very manageable with level 2 wizards. If you do go down the multiple level 2s route, do think carefully about boosting Beer Honours in particular, because it's a huge cast value for a level 2. But otherwise, the general tactics section will cover we've already covered will tell you how to maximise these guys. One thing that should be abundantly clear at this point though is that both Lord and Hero Wizards are exceptionally viable choices in a competitive setting with the Law of Light. So let's move on to the final section of our video now, where we look specifically at the Law of Light and the armies that can take it. Now, I'll take a brief look at each of the armies with an overview of things to remember when using the Law of Light with them. This is in effect practical pointers for the tactics we've already discussed. High Elves. Elves in general see the least amount of meaningful buffs from the Law of Light. You probably gathered this from the general tactics section, as they hit regularly but don't necessarily have the greatest strength values, something that lines up broadly with what the Law of Light's going to do. It's going to make you hit regularly but doesn't improve your strength at all. That said, there are a few tactical tricks for the Law of Light and High Elves. First up, I would look at including Alariel the Radiant in my army list if I was intending to run this law. That's because you gain access to the Banner of Avalon. Law of Light spells that target a unit with the Banner of Avalon gain +4 to the casting attempts, in addition to other pluses. So that's, if you cast it with Alariel, it's +8. That makes practically every augment in the law a 1 dice cast. That's going to help you get a lot of spells off. From there, my list would include both White Lions and Sword Masters of Hoeth, as they get plenty of benefit from the speed of light and fast protection, thanks to their consistently impressive strength. Baronas is also good on them as it gives them an extra attack, but don't be fooled, it cannot restore their always strikes first, as they already have the rule, so they can't get it again. I'd include 2 level 1 wizards as well, one with the Forbidden Rod, who I'd put in a unit with the Banner of the World Dragon, as then he gets his 2+ ward save against hits from the Rod. Thanks Rulebook FAQ. Priority spells, unsurprisingly, would be Banishment, Speed of Light and Fast Protection. Dark Elves. It's a similar story in terms of synergy with the Law of Light buffs and the Dark Elves, I'm afraid. They have it even harder as they don't have those shiny banners we just talked about. It isn't all doom and gloom though. Dark Elves can do a very interesting list with the Law of Light. I'd look at 3 wizards again, probably with a level 4 and 2 level 1s. I'd make all of my core units Dark Riders with crossbows. I'd also include 2 units of Doomfire Warlocks, some Bolt Throwers and 2 regiments of Executioners. All of my wizards would be mounted on Dark Steeds and would avoid our enemies, whilst raining death by 1,000 cuts at them. This combination with the crossbows from the Dark Riders, the Doom Bolts from the Doomfire Warlocks, the Bolt Thrower hits, the 3 Shem's Burning Gazes and the Banishment, if you've got it, will whittle down an enemy force. Finally, you can countercharge with those Executioner blocks for high strength damage, which you can improve with your Law of Light buffs. Weapon Skill Initiative 10, for example. Priority spells, well, it would be getting the signature spell on each of those 3 wizards, Banishment on the level 4, and then probably Speed of Light next. But looking for the remainder of the spells, I would just take a look at what I felt was best for my matchup. Wood Elves. Like their dark cousins, the Wood Elves use Law of Light best in a death by 1,000 cuts scenario. Largely, you want to use the conventional build, a core of 40 or so archers, 2 units of Wild Riders, some Sisters of the Thorn. In this version of the list, I'd go for 2 units of Sisters. This allows you to spread your wizards on Elven Steeds out, because that's what they would be on, like with the Dark Elf list. Unlike the Dark Elves, however, I'd probably go for 3 level 2 or 1 wizards, whatever I could afford, and then take a level 4 wizard on another lore, perhaps Dark Magic. Tactically, it then remains the same as the Dark Elves, raining down a spam barrage of magic missiles, bowfire, poison javelins, and looking to drop a counter charge with Wild Riders to get the job finished. This list will get a lot out of the Curse of Amrahir spells from those Sisters of the Thorn, and Net of Amantok as well is a great combination, allowing you multiple ways to control and slow your opponent's units, whilst the range onslaught can continue. The priority spells therefore are unsurprisingly the 3 Shem's Burning Gazes and Banishments. Then, if possible, Net of Amantok. A different, but I can assure you powerful build, especially against some of the real meta game armies. The Empire. Onto the Empire now, and whilst the Law of Light was a not so obvious match for the previous factions, the Empire really do get a huge boost from it. In fact, I'd go as far as to say it's one of the top 3 choices for an Empire army. Empire armies do well with blocked up units supporting each other, which, as we've seen from the general tactics section, is a winning formula with the Law of Light. Even better than this, the Empire have the War Altar of Sigmar, a fantastic choice in a Light Council army, and as such the way I would go. I'd have a War Altar and a level 4 wizard on the Law of Light, along with 2 level 1s. The War Altar has a bound spell of Banishment, meaning that you can get it in your army twice, once on a wizard, once on the bound spell. And this is maximum bombardment damage. And better still, the Banishment from the War Altar benefits from every light wizard, because you've got 3 of them, so it's up a point of additional strength. You know, what's not to like about that? I'd combine this with blocks of Halberdiers, Demigryph Knights, and maybe even some Greatswords, if I'm honest. I'd round this off with Celestial Hurricanum as well. This gives you a free power dice every turn to help get the maximum number of buffs off, and adds a flat +1 to hit in combat to nearby units, which with the spells from the Archlector on the back of the War Altar, and the War Altar's aura effects, will likely lead to you hitting on 3 pluses or even 2 pluses with your basic troops, rerolling failed to hit rolls in combat as well. This gets the most out of the buff spells from the Law of Light, and the bonuses from the War Altar for your units. Beyond this, stick to the general tactics we discussed above. With artillery in your list and the positioning tactics, you have a very dangerous army. My top choices for the level 4 would therefore be Banishment, for the second one, Birona's Time Warp, and the Speed of Light, although all of the spells in this law are good for Empire armies. Hitting the signature spells on the level 1s, as you might expect, is great too. Lizardmen. When we discussed the solitary level 4 on the Law of Light earlier in this tactics video, we were really doing that for the benefit of Lizardmen, as only the Slam Mage Priest has access to this law. The augment spells from the Law of Light, increasing the weapon skill, initiative and attacks of units, whilst making units harder to hit and effectively unbreakable in the process, are absolutely incredible for Lizardmen. Their average leadership and quality strength and toughness, and fairly good saving throws, really do synergise well with the Law of Light. In that way, the best option for Lizardmen players is to forgo the damage spells on your Slan and stick to the others. To complement this decision, I would want to include several specific things, and the first of these is Teto Echo. The Skink hero has the Loremaster Law of Heavens, and this guarantees you some high strength spells in the form of Comet of Cassandora, Uranan's Thunderbolt, and Chain Lightning. Plus, the signature spell adds to making the Saurus even harder to hit. It's another -1 to hit spell. I'd also include a Bastiladon with a Solar Engine. Now, this is great for 2 reasons. Firstly, it increases the initiative of nearby units, meaning you're more likely to reroll hits with Baronas off if you only get the 1 spell. Secondly, he gives you the Beam of Chotek bound spell. Now, this is a magic missile with very high damage potential, again supporting the Slan like Teto Echo. I'd use this all with my blocks of Saurus Warriors and Temple Guard, and I'd likely try to drop a Stegodon or 2 in there as well for more high strength damage, which I can protect from artillery strikes with Fire's Protection. So, looking at the spells, my first aim would be the Speed of Light and Fire's Protection, with Barona's Time Warp not far behind, and then again, the third choice fitting to whatever I felt was best against my current matchup. Tomb Kings. Finally, we have the Tomb Kings, and if you've seen any of the competitive Tomb King battle reports on the channel, you'll know that I think a Light Council is the winning formula for this faction. Either with Khalida, a level 4 on the Law of Nakara, and multiple Light Wizards at level 2 or level 1, or as I prefer, a level 4 on the Law of Light, 2 level 1s on the Law of Light, and a level 4 on the Law of Nakara. This is a good all-round list, bringing in a Hira Titan to add D3 to every casting attempt, meaning that the spam cast of the signature spell is absolutely consistently vicious, and the Casket of Souls, adding D3 power dice to the pool every turn, just ensures you get a lot of spells off. Back this up with rows of archers and Screaming Skull catapults, and you've got a really great ranged threat army. Then, I always ensure I have some Tomb Guard, Necropolis Knights or Morghasts to be my counter charge element. Now, if I'm honest, that order that I mentioned them in is the order that I believe they are sort of more favourable in. So the least favourable is the Tomb Guard, middle Necropolis Knights, and then Morghasts being the best choice. And that's simply so that I've got countercharge threat for all of those powerful augments. When paired further with the augments from the Law of Nakara, you can get up to an additional 2 attacks, which is 4 attacks if you drop it on the Necropolis Knights, as they've got both at right around amount, with that extra weapon skill, Killing Blow, and more. Or you can go ultra defensive with Speed of Light for weapon skill 10, Fast Protection for -1 to hit, and the 5+ ward save from the Law of Nakara. This flexibility helps to elevate one of the lower powered armies to compete at the top. So my first pick on that level 4 wizard for the Law of Light is Banishment, as I'm invested in the Light Council. After that, I'm looking at the Speed of Light, then Baronas or Fars depending on the matchup. With Net of Amantok also a great choice in such a defensive army. Really, the only spell I'm not that interested in is the Light of Battle, and quite frankly that means that you rarely have bad spells when you take the Law of Light with Tomb Kings. You love to see it. To conclude, I'm sure you can see the powerful transformative effect that the Law of Light has to offer your battle line, and that its 18 out of 24 rating shows the real strength of this law, considering that lack of a unique killer type spell. As ever, please feel free to get in touch with us through our social media, or comment on the video with your thoughts about the Law of Light, and head back to the Knights of the Realm mustering ground to check out all of our other exclusive content. I'll see you next time on 20-0 Tactics.
Remember to tag your friends and like, subscribe and share. Then head over to triplecrownwargaming.com and become a Knight of the Realm today.
What are you doing, mate?
You alright? Do it for Warhammer!